Are we ready? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our special City Council meeting tonight, Thursday, August 15th, 2019. We have budget hearings scheduled. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Well, let's start with a roll call and determination of quorum, please.
Nordstrom. Here. Modrick. Here. Roberts. Here. Stroman. Here. Armstrong.
Here.
Lewis. Lehman. Here. Drury. Here. Evans. Here. Drew. We have a quorum.
Great. Now that a quorum has been established, we will do our Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are going to begin this evening. We will start with general public comment. I would just like to add a few parameters. We will have the public speak. We have some public speaker request forms. Please make sure that your cell phones are off or turned down. And if and when you are speaking, we would appreciate some respectful and productive dialogue. And I would like to have this budget hearing concluded by 7:30. Around 7:15, well, we'll just see how the time goes, but that's the time frame that I'm looking at, and then we can just kind of go from there. All right, so we have a general public comment. We're going to have a 3-minute time frame per speaker, and the first person that I have here is Mr. Don Stover. Please come up and state your name, address. And you will have 3 minutes.
Good evening, I'm Don Stover, 5008 West Chicago Street, Rapid City. I'm the president of the Rapid City Concert Association, also known as the RCCA. The RCCA was formed in 1937 for the purpose of bringing high-quality professional entertainment at an affordable price to the people of Rapid City. We have, for the past 82 seasons, provided 6 nationally as well as internationally acclaimed professional performers for our audience's enjoyment. We are all volunteer, nonprofit organization formed entirely for the cultural betterment of members of the Rapid City community. Our ability to attract and bring the Civic Center's fine arts theater outstanding performances enables the community to enjoy the musical arts at an affordable price, and since the large majority of our membership is senior citizens, they are able to go out for an evening of entertainment, which they might not otherwise be able to do if it was not for the RCCA. Also, we provide a student workshop yearly and donate complimentary tickets to children and adults in need through the Allied Arts Fund office. The funding which enables us to continue comes from 3 sources: membership, currently $90 per adult, $10 per child, and $25 per college student. This entitles the member to all 6 performances, donations and sponsorships from the community, and number 3, Rapid City Arts funding via Allied Arts. This brings me to the question of the mayor's proposed budget. I realize the amount received by the RCCA is but a small percentage of our total budget. However, it is integral to our budget. It is also money we don't need to go beg from the community. I've heard it said that it's easy to get donations from patrons from the community. If this is the case, then I would ask each of you to break out your checkbook and write me a check for $250, and I'll gladly pick it up and take it to my treasurer. Fundraisers, from my personal experience, are not easy to do. I can attest to that fact. I've been refused many, many times, hung up on, or not called back, or even given an opportunity to speak to somebody. What I don't understand is why Allied's portion of the contingency fund has been cut 2 years in a row. Is this a trend? Is music not considered an art form? And why was this huge Allied cut redirected towards the Doll to support the arts and maintain the facility? The Doll, being a city building, should be maintained with monies which are earmarked, not maintained for money earmarked for the arts. Also, I would contend the arts the RCCA with its 1,000-person audiences provides as much cultural opportunity to the citizens of Rapid City as does the Doll. I'm not here to ask for an increase in city budget, but what I am here to ask for is your consideration as it regards the Allied Arts funding cut proposed by the mayor and restoring the funding back to the community arts as it was intended when the contingency fund was established. Thank you for considering my concern.
Thank you, Mr. Stover. We have another speaker request form from a Janet Morgenstein. Please come up, state your name, address, and you have
Hi.
3 minutes.
Okay, Janet Morgenstern, 6665 Manchester Street in Somerset. However, I'm here representing Rapid City Children's Chorus. I'm the artistic director for that organization. And in addition to the many points that have already been made tonight, I only have a few to which to add. Rapid City Children's Chorus serves not only Rapid City but also the surrounding area. Historically, a lot of the children that we served came from middle class to upper middle class families. Now the children that we serve are largely, we're seeing more and more foster children, children from poverty, children from lower middle class families that are struggling to be able to pay for activities for their children. We provide an essential service, and if the council is concerned about the value their dollar gets, we get about $2,000 from Allied Arts per year, which is approximately 80% of our budget. Or, sorry, 8%. Let me restate that. Pardon me. That was terrifying. Sorry. That was 8% of our budget. That allows us to subsidize fees that we need to charge for those children to be able to participate. It also allows us to travel. We go every year to Pier at Christmas time to represent Rapid City at the state capitol with our students that are with us. And the impact that the cut, a large cut would have to our organization would directly impact how many students from lower to middle class to children to students in houses that live in poverty. It would greatly impact our ability to do so. And thank you very much for letting us speak tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Any other speaker request forms? Okay, well, I'll open it up to discussion. Mrs. Modrick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think if I'm in order, can I move forward then with what the topic of discussion was by our general comment, which is on the Allied Arts?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I think, as we've heard by 2 testimonies and received an awful lot of communication, we have in the past years as well as this year, the importance of Allied Arts and how its features and functions benefit a variety of our community. And one of the things that we don't get to hear a lot is how that is determined when those funds are put out there for all of these donations that come from the partnership of Rapid City. And I've had the opportunity of watching how the committee works in how they're going to distribute the funds, whether it was $104,000 and then it went to $99,000 and the impossible $75,000 that we're faced with right now with a 25% cut. And that committee works very hard. They work long hours. They do a one-on-one evaluation of every applicant. And every applicant comes before them. And then in the end, they take their budget sheet of what they've got to distribute and they manage that around and filter it through in order to try to provide the best of funding for every single organization that's going to get that funding for that year. Several council members have been to every meeting, and we're always invited. It's an open meeting, and council's always been invited. For me, I've always taken that up as something to go to because it is so important. Something that the public doesn't always get to hear is what that list is. Here's how important that list is to Rapid City. The recipients: Bells of the Hills, Black Hills Bluegrass, the Festival Association, Black Hills Chamber Music Society, Black Hills Community Theater, Black Hills Dance Theater, Black Hills Powwow, Black Hills Showcase Chorus, Black Hills Symphony Orchestra, Chamber Music Festival of the Black Hills, Dakota Arts Guild, Dakota Choral Union, Metallusa Historical Association, Rapid City Children's Chorus, Rapid City Concert Association, Rapid City Municipal Band, Rapid City Ranger Band, Rushmore Music Festival. I applaud all of these people that are providing this on behalf of Rapid City and its community. And we tend to look at our budgets, and sometimes we have to push our needs into the most vulnerable. But we can't forget the needs of those that are providing an amazing quality of life for Rapid City, which is part of our comprehensive plan. So does it look like a lot on a budget of $175 million? No. Is it a lot to the organizations of which I just read off? Absolutely. Is it devastating? In some cases, yes, and for us to deny that it is would be us coming into this blind. So I would hope we would reconsider. I know we can find $25,000. I know we can put this back into the budget. This is a simple dollar amount to work with. It's a good budget. It's a solid budget. But I don't believe that we need to disorganize something that's so valuable and so proven to our community. And I think we need to move it forward. Our history shows that it needs to be there. Our forefathers and mothers placed it there on purpose. It was too big of a task for Rapid City to try to manage this, so it was provided to the Allied Arts to do so, and they do a fantastic job. That's what I'd like to say for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Duly noted. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Mrs. Drew, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm sorry for my late arrival here. As far as the arts subsidy goes, there are by ordinance 4 organizations, and most people are aware of that, those 4 organizations being the concert band, as it was called then, it's now the symphony, a marching band. I'm going to try and get all 4 of them here. I hope I don't.
Community chorus.
Community chorus and?
Marching band.
I said marching band.
City Symphony and Municipal Band.
Oh, municipal band, of course. Those are the only 4 that were actually obligated by ordinance. So the rest of it is kind of a topping, if you will, on the cake for other arts organizations and organizations that I believe in and think are very important. I always really dread this part of the discussion because, in a way, I think of it as the art shaming session, because these folks that we're looking at are not unable to raise funds. They are very competent, they are strong, they have succeeded in the wake of incredible odds in western South Dakota. And I have every confidence that they will continue to do so. I am a little concerned that the Allied Arts list of recipients continues to grow past not only what was an original 9, then a 13, now is it 16 groups that get this money? I mean, we're dividing the pie so much, and there's no time here. Is there time restraints?
I think we're speaking freely.
Okay. And I hope to not go more than 50 minutes or so, but
Okay, I
you.
rescind that offer.
I admire these groups. I've worked with these groups. I've been part of the Allied Arts Fund. I was employed by the Allied Arts Fund. I worked for the Rapid City Arts Council. I was employed by them as a fundraiser. I work now for the Black Hills Playhouse as a fundraiser. It is my job. So I know what it's like to be out there in the trenches raising money. But I also believe in the people of western South Dakota because they have come through time and time again. And they come through for the groups that they love and support. And I think it's time that we start, I hate to say this is just not me to actually talk like this, but I've got to say it. It's okay that we're going to cut back a little bit this year That doesn't mean it's here forever, and everybody says, oh, if you cut it back now, it'll never come back. Well, the doll is a perfect example of somebody we cut back last year and gave more money this year. The Journey is a perfect example of a group we cut back last year and gave more money this year. It doesn't mean the end, and also these people change constantly. I mean, you know, next year we're going to have another election that will change out 5 people. So, or not. Some of them will be reelected. But, you know, it's always a new group that you're proposing your budgets to and that you're looking at when you're making these cases. I've talked to many of the groups that are involved in the Allied Arts Fund, and they would actually like to see some change in how the funds are distributed. They'd like to see maybe some kind of maybe I'm putting these words into their mouths, but, you know, some ways that the city can invest instead of just doling out money year after year and saying, go do the same things you're doing is great. There's a lot of people looking to invest in new ways to spend that arts money, and they might need more than someone else in a certain year. I'd like to have that kind of flexibility. I'd like to see a group that could look at who is doing the most innovative work and say, yeah, I want to give money to the Black Hills Symphony Orchestra because they're going to bring in, you know, Jalon Crosland is going to do a banjo show with them this year. And I want to support, you know, the Performing Arts Center because they're new and they're bringing in a lot of new shows that we really wouldn't often see in Rapid City. And I want to support the Journey because Troy is doing all kinds of new programming there. I'd like to see the Black Hills Chamber Music Orchestra work more with the Rushmore Festival. I see Michael Hill sitting out there. They have got a tremendous opportunity to do some great things. So what really speaks to me is I don't want to give money to have the same things done every year because we're talking about the arts, folks. This is the creative community. Let's see some creativity. And I think that if we just bend the formula a little bit, of course, with respect to the groups that we are obligated to fund by ordinance, that maybe we could have a different way of investing in the arts in our community. I want to look at new solutions because our community is changing so quickly that we have to keep up with it. I mean, who would have seen Art Alley as an actual, you know, something we see in our tourism guides right now? That's almost incomprehensible to me, yet it's there. And so I think that we have to go forward. I don't want to defund the arts. I don't want to give them any more at this point. I think this is a good budget. And I want to see more strategies from these groups. I know they're wonderful. I just don't want to hear about, you know, we just can't find the money anywhere else. Because it's difficult, but with digital fundraising and those kinds of platforms right now, if you're trying that, it works. You know, people are not wanting to respond to a letter every year or every 2 years or every 2 months or whatever your system is. A lot of the millennials, and I'm not one of them, but I love it when I get somebody that says, hey, you know, this is what we need, this is what we want, donate now. Okay, done. You know, and those kinds of strategies, I want to hear that from the arts groups. I want you, when you come here, to say when we are making decisions on this budget, you know, we do that. We make those donor asks. We do the digital stuff. We're out there on Facebook. We're doing videos of our work. We are making a case for ourselves every day and every way. And I know you have limited staff. Boy, I know that. But, you know, there are ways to get it done, and there are ways to raise more money on the internet that I think is being strategically mined at this point. So I won't go on any longer because maybe some other folks would like to make a comment here. But I don't want to say, I never want to hear these groups are the most vulnerable, because I think they're strong, and I think they're smart, and I think they're creative, and I think they're sustainable, and they've shown strength that a lot of groups just don't. They just give up and walk away. Now, I've had an arts organization that I've had for 35 years, Dee Dee and the Pharaohs. We've never taken a dime of city money, but, you know, there is a way you can go out and do your arts if you want to. You don't have to have city money. You can just say, you know what, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make my way in the world because I want to be an artist. You know, I don't want to get too much on that, but I just want to say that the list of the groups that I heard are all do very good work, but they're not pathetic, they're not inept, they know what they're doing, they know how to raise money, they know how to go forward, and if this money is taken away, it is certainly not the end of their world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Drew. Mr. Nordstrom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. After our comments that were made here at the first budget hearing, there was some social media put up there on primarily off of Facebook, and I was reading some of that information that was made available, and the comments were not very well placed or put or described of what was taking place here on the City Council. And as soon as I was reading some of those comments on there and trying to address it in a positive way, I was rather roasted on social media. And I wasn't really enamored with that. So I was wanting to come back and come up with some kind of an advisory council, make a suggestion, but as Alderwoman Drew suggested, is that there is an ordinance out there that we need to take another look at and see if that can be applied. And I applaud Alderwoman Drew's efforts to bring that conversation forward, and I fully support that taking another serious look at that ordinance, because it seems like at the current time we're not complying with our own ordinance. For me, this is another case of what we have to do to satisfy the requests that are being made. We have to, with the current budget, we have to rob Peter to pay Paul. And I'm not prepared tonight to do that. Doesn't mean that I'm closing the door on this, but let's take a look at this ordinance first and then see what we can do with that so we are not robbing Peter to pay Paul. Some good examples that Alderwoman Drew brought up is the Journey Museum, a classic example of how to survive or come back. Because as Mr. Kilpatrick did this last year, he put, in my understanding of how he did the process over there, is made several changes, created new members. The list goes on for what the Journey Museum applied in a very positive way. Another group that we defunded but is still around is RSVP, and they've been able to survive. They come back and they are doing tremendous work over there on primarily their own work that they're doing within the city and the staff that they have over there, one person that's been able to do that. And they are doing a tremendous job on coming back and helping out not only the seniors but the community as well. There's some other organizations around the city that have done this as well. As we've cut them, but they've survived, they've come back, and again, I go back to the Journey Museum as an example of how to be very productive, very positive in what they've had to do with coming back and to the position. They're not all the way back to where they were a couple of years ago, but they're coming back. And it's impressive what they do. There's some, and I know I'm leaving out some other organizations within the city that we do have an investment within, and I don't call it a subsidy. This is an investment. So I want to see the return on investment, and these groups are doing that and capable of doing that. So that's where I'm at right now, is just, I would like to see this ordinance again and seeing what can be done through the ordinance process that is already on the books. Thank you. Yield.
Excellent examples, Mr. Nordstrom. Thank you. Mrs. Drury, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to switch topics just a little bit, and may I direct a question to Pauline Sumption, please?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Pauline, we have a couple members up here that it's their first time through the budget, and we know that it's daunting. The first line item under every subheading is salaries and benefits. Those, just help me clarify that for the newer members, that those are amounts that have been contracted. They're not really anything we can touch in the budget because we've already reached negotiations with them. Could you just touch on that, please?
You bet.
And if you also know, do you know what percentage of the budget salaries and benefits is?
Off the top of my head, I do not, but I know I've calculated that in the past, and it's been anywhere from 75 to 80% of the general fund budget is salaries and benefits.
Okay.
So a lot of it is personnel related. So the city actually has 5 different unions that we have contracts with. I don't know if you want me, police is one, fire is another. We have 2 different AFSCME unions, one for general, one for library, and then we also have the IATSE union at the Civic Center for the stagehands. And so the contracts vary anywhere from 1 to 3 years, maybe 4 on one, I can't remember. But they're all in place right now. We are currently negotiating with the AFSCME and AFSCME Library for 2020 and beyond. At this point, we don't know what the time length will be. But those raises are guaranteed as far as how they're calculated. Both January 1 is typically the one for basically longevity type raises, and then July 1 is for the cost of living adjustments. For the union positions, those are not something that we can change unless they were to come to agreement with us, which has not been welcomed, very kindly received in the past when we've had budget constraints and approached a couple of the unions on that. But I understand too that we had contracts and we needed to fulfill them. The only thing that is not set in stone, but historically we have followed the AFSCME contract, is the non-union employees. Those can be anywhere from administrative assistants to department directors, anybody who holds a position in the city that is more confidential in nature, where anything that they know could impact the negotiations in the future. So that's the only thing that isn't set. We still are on the same wage scale as the or we have a wage scale just like the unions do. However, we bring a resolution forward after the budget is approved to basically then put into place what our raises would be for the following year for those non-union employees. Also included in that is health insurance. How that is broken out is also outlined in the union contracts, where the city, what portion the city pays for the premiums for that. And then there's retirement benefits, and then your typical taxes that are withheld, our matching requirements. That.
No, I just wanted a quick overview of that for myself and other council members.
It does take up a lot of the general fund budget. We are service-oriented, the general fund typically, and so that's where your assets are, is in personnel.
Our people are our assets. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Evans, you have the floor.
Well, I'm not as eloquent as either Lisa or Ms. Drew over here. I agree with everything Lisa said, and I agree with most of what Darla had to say, but I do disagree with one thing Darla pointed out. I think the fact that this budget has a 24% reduction in that one particular category, it's very conspicuous that that was either a hostile act or something. It doesn't make any sense why every other category in the budget remains virtually the same, but one takes a 24% cut. So people have to take that for what it is, and I think it's very obvious what it is. Now, I spent my entire life trying to grow children through culture, and I understand the importance of it. And if I were sitting in the mayor's chair, there'd be a 24% increase in those kind of things, because I believe that's what causes the necessary decrease in the budget required to maintain jails and other such things. Now, I think that we've got to stop thinking of any dollar we spend for the arts as an expense and start thinking of it as an investment. I know that when people go to a concert, they don't go home right after that concert. They go out and they either beforehand have a good meal, or they go out and have drinks afterwards and spend a lot of money. And I would be willing to bet for every dollar that we invest in the arts in this town comes back in taxes several times over. So I think we've got to stop thinking of it that way and start thinking of it as an investment that pays for itself. Now, I look at the Parks and Rec budget. I think we have a fabulous Parks Department. I've told the guys so. I love it. I'm proud of that. And as I travel around the country, I'm amazed at how much they get done. But you have to remember, people that are involved in the arts, that is their recreation. They're not playing softball, they're playing saxophone, you know? And so if that was under a different category, we would never be talking about it being cut. But these are very important activities for the people that participate in them, and I think bang for the buck, it's probably the best money spent by the city, because I think it involves the most people, and I think it brings back the greatest payoff in the long run, not only in terms of city morale and prestige, but just overall feeling of a well-rounded community. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, any other additional comments? Discussion, topics? Mr. Nordstrom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you and I have discussed in the past, and just as in recent emails, may I switch topics?
Absolutely.
Thank you. One of the pressing issues, if you will, that the mayor has been talking about this budget and other budgets in the past has been, I believe he uses the word diversity and revenue diversity, and I think that's the language he's using. And so is there any opportunities we can have that discussion about some kind of revenue diversity? There's some small ideas I have, but I wonder if there isn't some capabilities of thinking a little bit more outside the box in those areas. I hold up the airport as an example, the Civic Center is another example, and some other sources that are out there and available. The one I like to use also is P3s, public-private partnerships, something that we can explore, but I'm not intending that to be part of the budget changes. That's not my intent, but I'd like to have a discussion on that when the opportune time is available. So because of the mayor's discussion of having some kind of diversity on the revenue side, it is hopefully we get a chance to explore that opportunity. Thank you. Yield.
Great. Mrs. Drew, you were in the queue.
I was, but could I direct a question to Richie Nordstrom, please?
Absolutely.
Richie, could you go a little bit further there? What do you mean by diversity, income diversity? Because that sounds great to me. I just don't know what it means.
Economic diversity, that's the term I heard.
Yep. Revenue diversity, meaning that the money that's coming into the city, is there other ways we can explore just something else in addition to the sales tax? Because, as you know, we're heavily reliant upon sales tax. And if it goes up, we're doing good. If it goes down, we're in a bad situation, like what's happening tonight. As a good example, because the revenue is not coming in what we would like to see it coming in at. It's coming in okay, but where the revenue is coming in at the sales tax, it's not that great. The other big burden that we place on the taxpayers is property tax. And what I would like to do is explore some opportunities that's available out there, and we may not be utilizing it to the full extent. I use the airport as an example, not saying that we can or maybe even copy what the airport does in their diversity and how they're, because if you look at the pie chart for the airport, it's somewhat comparable to what the city's pie chart looks like. They've got X number of dollars that come in for the plane deployments and people that are getting on the planes. That is one of their largest sources of revenue. You start looking at the concourse, and there's some other additional funding that comes in. And then when you get down into the shops and businesses that they have on there, the restaurant, and then going out to the gateways, there's another source of revenue. Not as much, but it's another source of revenue that they have. And the Civic Center is very comparable to that. They have some other resources that they bring in as well. Is it possible that we, the city, can explore some other options? Because P3 is another source that could be utilized, that we're underutilizing right now. We do have some public-private partnerships under the current system, but can we explore expanding that in some other additional areas so we do not have to rely so heavily upon sales tax and property tax?
I get it. Okay, thank you, Richie. And as long as I have the mic here, I'm going to ask Pauline. Now, for some of the newer people that are here, and Lisa is not new, but if someone is requesting that funds be redistributed, is it their obligation to find out what that source might be if they want to see the arts subsidy funded at full levels? Is it their responsibility? Do they work with you? How do they go about looking at that possibility?
My preference is that if you want to increase the budget expense in one area, you either provide a new funding source or cut somewhere else. This budget is very lean, and the revenues projected are conservative but yet realistic. And so as far as where I know where the revenues are coming or where you guys think that the revenues should be, that's the number that's already been provided to the mayor, where I think our revenue sources are. I don't know if, in this instance, you know, we're talking $25,000. I don't know if there's a fee that you guys want increased to cover that. That would be something that you guys would have to decide as a council as a whole. And I know last year the mayor asked to please let him go back and make cuts when we chose not to increase the building permit revenue, but that was a much larger amount. And so that's why I guess I would put it back on the council to either come up with a funding source or a cut elsewhere in the budget to make up that difference.
So you would ask the people that on the council that are looking at this if they might want to, you know, if they're going to prepare for this next week, you know, that they would have something in mind that they're going to suggest?
That, yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, I guess in closing for my remarks, I like this budget. I will vote in favor of it. I see very few things that I really feel need to be changed. I think it's one of the best budgets we've been presented in years, and there's actually an increase to the arts funding overall, just one area, the Allied Arts Fund, which is being decreased, but overall I like what I see here because that is a very important part of budget to me. And also just the overall feel of this, I don't feel the contention here among the council members. In years past, I've had people that will call me and we'll talk through some things, but that really just hasn't been happening yet. It may, but at this time, I would just like to say that I can support this budget. Thank you.
Mrs. Drury?
Thank you, Chair. I have another question for Pauline Sumption, if I may.
Go ahead.
Pauline, does this budget also includes a property tax increase that the city can take, which is what amount this year?
It does include both CPI and growth, which is what we can increase our property tax revenue request by. And in 2020, let me find that. The CPI is 2.4% for 2020, and so it's $425,273. 425,273.
Thank you. I guess I just, I know that this is a very lean budget, but I'm a little concerned. When the mayor gave his presentation, he mentioned more than one time that wages in Rapid City are pretty stagnant. And with the stock market, we don't know what it's going to do. I know I don't have the crystal ball either. But if things aren't going to grow, I don't know if this is a good time to be raising taxes on our citizens, on our neighbors. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, and Mrs. Modrick, we're back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I ask Pauline a question, or two or three? So Pauline, when you were talking about the CPI and it's in that 2% range, is the max that we can go 3%?
The state statute says 3% or CPI, whichever is lower.
And then also, and do you know where we're running at right now as far as statewide? Or because I know that sometimes the state looks at that number. Is it, are we right in the middle then with our CPI at the 2.3 that you had quoted?
I guess I'm not understanding the
We
question.
have between 1 and 3, and so you said on this budget we have it at 2 point.
It's CPI for the region.
Yep.
Or 3%, whichever is lower. So in this case, the CPI was 2.4%. So
Okay.
that's why it's the 2.4%.
And is that our max then that we need to stay at?
That is the max.
And then also on our general fund revenue page that we have with actuals 2019 and 2020, there's a miscellaneous in our general fund revenue, and it's a up and down. It showed in 2018 we had 1.3 million in actuals. Then at 2019 it sees a drop in revenue at 4.25 and budgeted at 2020 at 810. Can you tell me what that up and down is?
Well, it's interest, so it depends on interest rate. It's property rentals. If we sell any property, that's included in there. I know in 2018 we had a pretty good result at our city auction. And then we have recovery items, things like that, or if we have to repair damage and then bill whoever caused the damage, that goes under the recovery item. There's times when developers will have to pay for something, and that goes into the recovery item. And so that really varies every year depending on what is out there.
So do we have some way to project 2020 at 110,000? How do we come up with that number?
810,000. I used the recovery at 500,000. That's the one that is very, extremely up and down depending. And looking at, I guess I looked at past history on that and did a conservative look on that because it was about 743 in 2018.
So then the 2018 actuals that I have on the revenue sheet that we're showing, where it shows the miscellaneous at 1.3 million,
That's all those categories I listed off together.
and then drop in 2019, but rebound in 2020.
Right.
Is there any more rebound sitting in there that maybe we haven't looked at?
It's hard to tell.
25,000?
It's hard to tell. It honestly is hard to tell.
So that could be an area that we need to look at a little bit farther as we're going through our hearings?
It's an area you can look at. I would, just because it's not really on us to figure out what revenues we're going to get that go into that category, it makes it very hard to be able to predict it. So I would just be cautious when you look at that type of revenue source.
Is there any place else under our predictions for 2020, and I know you said it was lean, but there was a conservative lean in there that maybe has a little bit more opening for us, that since this is the first presentation, usually we can tweak it a little bit more on either side. either whether it's in there or in another location, because the only other option would be to send it back to the mayor to find me $25,000.
Really, if it's an increase in revenue and not a cut somewhere else, the miscellaneous revenue would be the best place to look.
So I think that's something that we need to consider, because it is a conservative number, but it's probably got some room in there. And it's modest there, but when you're looking at the trend, the up and down trend, it may have an opportunity to add that additional, it'd be less than 1%, to sit in there and pull that revenue source from there. So I think that we have a recommendation there that we could maybe capture that fund, put it into our budget, and resolve a 25% hit on one line item. Thank you.
Great discussion thus far. Anyone else? I knew we'd have a taker. Mrs. Drury, the floor is yours.
Sure, I'll ask. I'm looking under the general fund revenue, and where we're down 16% under grants and government revenue. Can you explain that a little, Pauline? I'm sorry, we're just picking your brain tonight.
That's okay. That's what I'm here for. The largest chunk is out of transportation planning. That is a grant-driven budget, and so it's about 81.95% of the budgeted expenditures will be returned in grant revenue. So it's always based on whatever their budget is. In this case, I believe there was a project, the mayor touched on this during his presentation. There had been a project that was budgeted for in 2019 that was a larger chunk of money. I want to say it was like $300,000. That obviously the project is done, is budgeted for. It won't be there again in 2020. Right. So there's a $400,000 decrease right there, which makes up over half of the difference that you'll see. In addition, it looks like police grants are going to go down about $200,000, and a BLM grant is going down $100,000 based on what's going on in their departments.
And do you see anything under licenses and permits, or maybe this is a Ken Young, he left, question, coming, rising in the future instead of going down?
So I will say the liquor licenses and the lottery machines are revenue sources that are out of our control, per se. Those are established through the state, what we can charge for those. All the other licenses and permits are city-determined rates. And I will tell you that since I've been here, which is 12 years, we have hardly touched any of these rates, and some of them, much like building permits that was discussed last year, over 20 years that they haven't been touched. And so those are always something, Richie talked about the revenue and diversity, but really we need to get our rates up to market rates before we, in my opinion, before we start looking at other things to bring in revenue.
Could you give me like 4 or 5 examples of those?
Let's see, security licenses are one. They've stayed the same for as long as I've been here. We changed it once, but basically we doubled the cost and doubled the length of time that it was good for. Contractor licenses are another one. Building permits are in there. Air quality permits, sign permits. The new one is the vacant property permits, but that is a minimal revenue. We receive about $1,000 in that, but we started that because basically we became property managers for some people, and that kind of deters that a little bit. They have to register with us. Business licenses, we also have plumbing and taxi drivers and all sorts of other types of businesses that we do license as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Nordstrom.
Thank you, Madam President. I was just reminded of something else here that as I've held some other discussions And I want to say Alderwoman Drury brought up a suggestion that hasn't been explored too much, and I don't know if it'll even work, but one of the other areas that we've not explored very much is grant funding. And the avenue that's available to us is the library. They'd have a very large database. Now, there's some filters and constraints and limitations, and by the time you get it, but it's still a very large database that can be explored for some grant funding. And I'm not prepared to ask the library director for any questions on it, but she has shared with me that they do have a very large database that can be looked at for grant funding. So that's another resource that's available as well. Thank you.
I love our library.
Unless Terry wants to come up there and talk about it, but no, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Nordstrom. Mrs. Modrick, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for letting me come back into the queue. May I ask Pauline Sumption a question regarding expenditures? So when we get into the general fund expenditures and we have the City Hall with the asterisk of a 22% increase on our expenses for our City Hall maintenance, government buildings obviously are the item below that. So is that City Hall maintenance, the maintenance of the building of which we're in, we're getting ready to take on the entire building as well as a project to upgrade it that is necessary and needed? Is that part of that maintenance, or is this a spread out maintenance with a jump at 22%?
That is strictly for this building, going from having 60% in 2018 for the whole year to 60% of the cost for half the year in 2019 to 100% of the cost in 2020.
And why do we think we'll be at 100% in 2020? Because we're just now bidding out, aren't we, on this project?
This is just repairs and maintenance and janitorial and everything in this building. 100% is us now because the school moved out in June. So they're not sharing in any of those costs. Up to this point, they're sharing in those costs.
So have we filled every space in the building that requires a 22% increase in expenses?
We are working on it.
But we're not there yet.
We're going out to bid in September for it, and you guys authorized that at the last meeting to get that started, and so we'll have people moving over from the transit Milo Barber building, and then we will be fully occupied.
And that's a project that's going out to bid, and it could go into half of 2020. Do we know when that is destined to be ready for 100% occupancy? Because we're going to have to get the 100% okay before we can move people in.
My understanding is they're doing it in phases. The last I saw, there's 4 different phases. And some of it is on the first phase, some of it's on the 3rd floor, some of it's on the 1st floor. And then they'll move those people up, and then they'll start on the next phase. But as soon as the spaces are available for those few people that are going to move over, they will get moved over. But like my office, we'll still be in our space during the
whole project.
The whole project.
So really, is this then a futuristic number based on when the school was there, their expenses, or how did we determine that we need that 22% increase while we're in the phases as well? Because perhaps maybe we won't have everybody in until June, half a year.
Ironically, the mayor didn't believe me when I gave him the figures I gave him for my projections, and we sat down with Dave Yannick, who was the assistant superintendent of finance at the time, and he confirmed that my numbers were completely realistic. And so taking into account the building, because we have to take care of the building whether the people are here or not, and there's, let me count quick, there's 3, 4, 5, 6 people that will be moving from the transit building over here. And so personally, I don't think that those 6 people are going to cause a whole lot of difference in what is needed for repairs and maintenance and janitorial and that type of thing.
Does some of their budget come over too, since they've been doing some maintenance of their own over there?
Actually, most of that has fallen on transit, on the building itself. That's a different pot of money.
Any other movement that's coming in that will offset that, that's already in that budget, that can move over to this budget, since this is such a big increase of our maintenance expenses?
There really isn't at this time. I know the mayor and I have talked about what to do with the spaces once they move over. And there may be opportunity for some rental income, like we used to have over in that building. And, but right now, the general fund subsidizes the Milo Barber building also, because what we do get in rent does not cover the maintenance costs over there.
So there could be a movement, but then empty space, but we still have to maintain the empty space until we decide what we're going to do with the empty space, which could create revenue.
Correct.
And I'm looking for revenue.
I'm good with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, any more discussion? Mrs. Modrick.
I stayed in there by accident, so I'm glad to be here. I'd like to make a motion to move this budget forward to the next hearing, but also send it back for that $25,000 to put back into the Arts Contingency Fund, and have the mayor have an opportunity to take a look again at some of these questions that we've had, and see if it can actually come to fruition. If we could get a second for discussion.
It's my understanding that tonight is for discussion only and not for action.
Is it? Yeah, wait, we're in a hearing.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Modrick, a second by Mr. Evans. Restate
Still
that.
retain the floor?
Yes.
Thank you. So again, I just state the case that just a few things that we've looked at in our very first hearing is showing that we've got some funds here and there that maybe we can look a little bit closer at, that could bring up a level that of the Arts Contingency Fund that got hit so hard, and bring that back into fruition so that our arts as a whole has the quality funding of which our community believes in. It came through when we had the survey that was done, that the arts was still important. It's important to tourism. It's important to our children. It's important to our elderly. It's important to me. My sales tax, because I buy only local, and my property tax would cover the $25,000. I'm telling you, I know it's in this budget. And I don't think it means we have to push something out to put it back in. I believe we already have it here. And if we send it back, I think at the next hearing, we're probably going to have a solid budget that we can pass that's going to be really clean and ready to go, and move our community forward with the good things that are in it, as well as some of the necessary things and the safety things and the stuff that makes our city tick. And we already talked about that. One of the biggest assets is our human asset. That we can't budge very much. It's a part of our community. We have to human asset it to run it, to make things happen. But this is also a piece of that human asset that's just too valuable to ignore. Thank you.
Okay, we have 3 more people in the queue. Mrs. Drury, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to make a substitute motion that we move this forward to the next budget meeting without any recommendations.
Okay, I have a motion by Mrs. Drury, a second by Mr. Roberts. I wasn't quite sure who it was, so I was guessing there. All right, so all in favor? Aye. The substitute motion, correct? Yeah, maybe. Can we do a roll call, please, for the substitute motion?
Lehman, Drury, Evans, Drew, Nordstrom, Modrick, Roberts, Stroman, Armstrong.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-2.
Okay. Wait, we have somebody in the queue. And guess who it is? Mrs. Modrick?
I'm now Guess Who. Might get a badge that says Guess Who. I just need a point of question, if I could. So this motion was basically to pass this budget. So why are we moving it to hearing? As it is, without a change. So why aren't we passing the budget? Why are we having another hearing?
If I might ask, are you, to help with your
Please.
clarification, are you moving it to second reading of the ordinance without any changes, or are you wanting another hearing like we're having tonight? A hearing, not a second reading of the ordinance. Okay. Then we need to figure out number 2 before we adjourn.
All right, that being said, we need to have one more budget hearing. We will need a quorum, correct? At least 6?
Correct. I had 2 with no responses, and so the next date that I suggested was August 20th. I had 4 that said that they could be available on the 20th. I had 4 that said they could be available on the 21st, and I had 5 that said they could be available on the 26th. So I'm not sure about Darla and Bill, if either of those days work for you.
I'd like to determine that tonight, if at all possible. Possible. So we have August 20th, August 26th, and 21st. The 20th, the 21st, and the 26th. I think we're leaning towards the 26th, which is a Monday.
Correct. I would need 2 additional attendees on the 20th and 21st, or at least 1 on the 26th.
Who can be here by show of hands on the 26th? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's set that for the 26th. Do we have to make a motion to make it on the 26th?
We'll send out the notices, that type of thing.
Okay. All right. I'd like the second and hopefully final budget hearing on the 26th, if at all possible. Okay. Any further discussion on setting?
If I might ask if there's any other information that you guys want prior to that, please let me know so we can have that ready for you.
And I think the directors were very forthcoming by saying if you had any questions to reach out to them. If we have any questions, go from there. Of course, we can talk among ourselves as well. Mr. Nordstrom?
Thank you, Madam President. I was going to see if I could help out Alderwoman Drury on why we need a second meeting, and one of my responses would be is to not necessarily make a decision on this ordinance that's been presented or some indications on it, but just some more information on it. And then also, I would like to hear a little bit more understanding, especially for the new council members, because I don't know if I've got a total grasp of it, is the PILTS, payment in lieu of taxes. I don't know if we've got a clear discussion on that as well. And again, I'm looking for revenue diversity. And I don't know if that will help or hinder or anything, but just some additional information in those other areas. Because for me, that was one of the things that stood out for me in the mayor's budget presentation, just one of the many items, but the revenue diversity. And I think PILTS could be one of those items to explore, not necessarily making a decision, but if there's any other conversation on it. And then, as I suggested also, is that a little better understanding what this ordinance is that we've been discussing tonight too, to bring that forward, so we have a little bit understanding what we're dealing with before that actually gets implemented as well. Because I'm not sure that, I'm totally understanding of that ordinance that's been talked a little bit about tonight, and I'm sure the new council members are not completely aware of it either. So, so that's just those two items, and I don't know if that's a help or a hindrance to Alderwoman Drury's suggestions. So, thought I'd try to help.
Mrs. Sumsterson, I have a question. Will that PILT discussion either make or break this budget that we are talking about?
It shouldn't, but it could.
I just wanted to make sure in my mind.
I will tell you, I can just tell you briefly, PILT is an acronym for Payment in Lieu of Taxes, so we charge enterprise funds a PILT for general fund type services that aren't covered through interdepartmental charges, such as snow removal, police, fire protection, that type of thing, like a normal homeowner or business owner would be charged. We determine what rate we charge them for PILT based on their insured value of their structures, because the county does not give value to non-taxable properties. So that's the one thing that we can go off is through insured values, and then we use the mill levy to calculate it. So, and we're still phasing in the civic center's PILT.
Thank you for that summary. Anyone else? Welcome a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn by Mrs. Drury, second by Mr. Lehman. We have, I'm sure we'll have some continued discussion on Monday. We have our city council meeting at 6:30 here in these chambers. I'd like to see you here. Thank you so much. We are adjourned. Oh, all in favor? Aye. Aye.